Wow, another week's gone by. It's a Friday. We're having a couple of drinks with friends, talking about things we know nothing about. And hey, look who's back.
Yeah, great to be back.
Ice cream colored pants and all.
Yeah.
Yeah, it looks. That's pink, right?
No, salmon.
Oh, right, salmon is a color.
Okay.
Yeah, it is. But look at you. You've got a bow tie and
Yeah.
a hat.
Yeah, like.
Can you actually tie a bow?
Would you like me to do it on the show?
That would be lovely.
No.
And
maybe in a rabbit hole.
I saw Rufaro last week. You were also wearing a bow tie, and I was quite impressed. I was like, Rufaro can actually tie a bow tie.
Oh, well, I didn't actually tie it.
So who did?
We had a doc on the set, and with the assistance of YouTube, he was able to figure it out. And
So you must have a pretty high IQ.
no, he does. He's a
Well,
physician.
not too many people in Zimbabwe can actually tie a bow. And
No, but you don't need a
they
high
just
IQ to
don't
tie a
understand.
bow.
Sorry?
You don't need a high IQ to tie a bow.
No,
It's just
when you
that's-
don't know how to, and you go on YouTube and you only have 5 minutes and you figure it out. A lot of people take months to figure it out.
Well, in fairness, the government does allow Simba to open up people while they're alive and close them back up again.
So,
Good to know. Well, good to know.
So he should have been able to figure out how to do.
And what happened to you? You couldn't figure it out?
No, I didn't have a mirror.
Well, I was impressed.
Anyway, welcome back.
Yeah.
Apparently, a lot of people missed you. Not
Well,
sure why.
I missed everybody. I must say.
Life was better without you. What are we drinking?
Well, today we've got a gift from our friend Musoni, who is not only a fan of the show but has been on the show a
Twice.
couple of times while Mukanya here was away. So apparently,
I think some of your groupies like him.
Oh, really?
so
Well, I like him as well.
Oh, right.
Yeah. He had a very interesting anecdotes and facts and figures about Cecil, some of which I actually totally disagree with, but lovely.
yes, you're a huge fan of Cecil, so you don't like to hear anything bad about Cecil.
There's
Okay,
a lot-
gentlemen,
there's
what
a
are we
lot that's
drinking?
bad with Cecil, but there was a lot that was good with it.
You missed
But
that.
anyway,
you missed that episode.
yeah, absolutely.
Next time, don't go.
I don't know why
we
he's
can do a
throwing
rabbit
in-
hole, yes, because I've got a lot to say about Cecil. Anyway,
Okay.
the La Santa from the House of Glenmorangie, which, by the way, is the best-selling single malt in Scotland. So you want to think that...
Wait, didn't you a few weeks ago tell us that it was Famous Cross?
No. That was the best-selling whiskey, not single malt. The Famous Cross is a blend. This is a single malt. They're different.
True.
Yeah.
True.
So this is the best-selling single malt in Scotland.
well, what's the difference?
Okay. Well,
No, that's a rabbit hole. if you know, you know. If you don't, you don't.
Oh, okay.
we'll explain it to you
Like a 6-year-old.
one day. Yeah, it's been the
Maybe your
best-selling.
viewers want to know.
Yeah, it's been the best-selling single malt for more than 40 years. So it's good, and we have Titch to thank for this lovely bottle. And so yeah,
Yeah, but I'm not letting you pour it.
we'll give you the honors.
Thank you.
So while he's pouring, we've got something else on set that's
Come on, take a whiff.
we've got something else on set
But it's
that
very weak. The smell.
It's not PT. That doesn't mean it's weak.
All right. What does it mean?
Okay, so if you don't want to sound like Tinashe when you talk about whiskey, we don't normally talk about what we're reading, but I've made an exception for this show. We've got this book on whiskey. It's a collaboration between the Whiskey Exchange and a whiskey expert called Nicholas Morgan. And it's a delightful book on whiskey that's written for 6-year-olds like me. It's very colorful. It's got lots of pictures, and they've done a really good job dumbing down all the jargon and intricacies of whiskey. So we're trying to drive up engagement on our YouTube channel. So if you subscribe and you engage with us or via your comments, in our season finale, we will give away a couple of these.
So subscribe to our YouTube channel and participate. You might get one of these books.
And sounds sophisticated and intelligent when you're around people who consume whiskey, not like Tinashe.
Not that I care.
Anyway,
Cheers.
Msoni, cheers.
Well, as usual, Musoni forgot about me, but that's okay. So we're trying out something different. It's a Malawi Shanti without the bitters to begin with, so that we can actually try Fruit Aid, which is a Bytebridge company. So I thought, let's try it first off without the bitters, so that we actually can taste it and see what it's like, and then afterwards with the bitters. So yeah, that's what I'm going to have.
Yeah, I thought you were
summer drink.
I thought you were going to say cheers then. Yeah, what do you make of it?
I don't like it.
You prefer Mazoe?
I prefer Mazoe, but let's see how it goes during the show.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thankfully, they're not paying for a placement.
Well, perhaps they never will now.
Well, let's see how it goes during the show, and then I'll be able to comment.
Yeah, but you speaking of Mazoe, that's a brand that's gone regional, isn't it?
To some extent.
They now make Mazoe in South Africa. They make it in Zambia, and perhaps a couple of other places. In fact, the brand is now owned by Coca-Cola. Doesn't that get you thinking, though? We have a lot of great things in this country. We have a lot of great companies. Why do so few of them ever transition to becoming regional or international brands?
Okay, so clearly you want a history lesson. And
no, we did not ask for a history
so why
lesson.
would you ask such a question? I mean, it just begets.
You're making up your own questions, aren't you?
History lesson. The reason why industry is inward-looking in Zimbabwe, it's because of 1965 when Ian Smith came in and he set up an industrial structure, and the industrial structure was such that it would service the local industry, the local market. So it was then limited. It was an inward-looking, limited industry structure and industrialization. So all they were thinking of is how to feed the people. It was a war economy, and it was primarily to feed the people within the confines of our borders. So
just
it already
to substitute
meant
imports.
To substitute imports. So it meant that your industrialization policy was not geared for a competitive global environment.
So
and I think that's
basically what you're saying is Ian Smith was petty and small-minded.
is that new?
What's up with all the hyperbole? But okay.
Or superlatives, but it's quite clear. He was inward looking. All he had to do was to survive. That's what he wanted to do. And he wanted an industry to survive because he knew that there will be sanctions, there will be embargoes and all sorts. So what he wanted was to build an industry that could service, at the time, less than 6 million people.
But this is
so
really,
if you think about it,
this is nearly
industry,
60 years ago.
Yeah, 56 years later.
Why does this?
Because, so you have this, unfortunately, it is the way it is, but it's very unfortunate. And it's, the problem we have is in industry in Zimbabwe, all you need to do is to own industry, and then you create all these barriers. So during the 80s, you would have assumed that Mugabe would have opened up the economy, but you guys did a brilliant job last week.
We did?
Yeah, well, I think Busoni was, so he did a far better job than most would in just enunciating the problems with a socialist and inward-looking. So you'd have thought that Ian Smith was bad in creating this industry that was inward-looking, but what you then had was Mugabe continuing that theme, but not only continuing that theme, but even inward-looking. It was even more inward-looking. But so industry that we've had, and unfortunately, because if you look at the auction, what is it about? It's about import substitution.
Please
it's
do
about
not say
inward-looking.
please do not say currency board.
Okay, I will avoid that word. But all I'm trying to say is, it's mind-boggling to think that industry in Zimbabwe looks at 15 million people as their market. Like that's as much as they would want.
So we got 50.
And SADC has 350 million people.
Like the population of America or like the population of Europe.
Can you believe it?
And we all our business.
But to be fair to our business community,
let's not be fair to them.
No. I want to be fair. Is it not
They've had 56
conceivable?
years. They've had 56
Is it not
years.
conceivable that they are operating in an environment in which there are plenty barriers to regional expansion, and they've looked at it
Like barriers like
and
what?
said,
Like what?
you know what?
Barriers like,
Like
what?
what?
I'm curious.
Yeah.
Barriers like what?
Tell me.
So okay,
They've had 56 years.
No, never mind the 56 years.
let me put it into
Okay,
Let,
so-
let-
so-
let me
so-
put it into context. You asked me like what, so let me answer.
Yes, please
Right.
answer.
So if you think about SADC and you compare us to another regional bloc like the EU, for example, okay, a flight from Harare to Joburg is 1 hour 30 minutes. A flight from Berlin to Paris is 2 hours 30 minutes. But it's cheaper to fly from Berlin to Paris than from Harare to Joburg. Why? Because of the taxes, because of all sorts of.
There are no taxes in terms of trade between SADC.
No.
In
But
fact,
I'm just
even
saying on the
within
flight.
farmers.
On the flight, like when.
So I make this fantastic product. I'm not going to sell it to South Africans because, oh my goodness, I'm going to pay an extra
cannot fly.
$50 on the flight.
No. I'm just giving you an example of some of the structural differences between a bloc like SADC and a bloc like the EU. Right?
What, you can drive?
You can ship stuff across the EU duty free.
No, it goes
Same
by
in SADC. Same in SADC.
road.
Same in
In
SADC.
EU,
you can
it's
ship.
really by road. You don't ship anything within the EU.
And it's the same in
it's
SADC. You
by
can
road.
you can ship it duty free.
Look, we can go down this rabbit hole. all
It's
you
not a
guys
rabbit
like,
hole.
But
I think
the
it's
truth
a
of the
fundamental
matter, the
question.
truth of the
Let's
matter
be
is that
clear about the matter. You've had 56 years, and our industry is just continuously inward-looking in a smaller market that is continuously shrinking, whose buying power is continuously shrinking.
So let's go back to the Mazoe example, right? So Mazoe was a brand owned by Schweppes Zimbabwe, and it was a Zimbabwean brand until Schweppes Zimbabwe became part of Coca-Cola, and Coca-Cola is like, wow, that's fantastic. Let's sell it in other countries, and it turns out people in other countries like it. Let's look at Chibuku, local brand. Again, eventually SAB Miller, now InBev, says, we think people in other countries will like this. And it's done reasonably well.
I think-
Let's look at Inscore, or now Simbisa. Chicken in, pizza in, creamy in. They're in several African countries. They're doing all right.
You know what they say? Poverty is always of the mind. And I think that our industry is extremely inward-looking. And of course, they get a few pocket change here and there. They will make money within the Zimbabwean market, but it's a tiny market. If you look at what's happening globally, if you tell people that Zimbabwe is a 15 million people market,
people will yawn.
they will yawn. I mean, if you look at Nigeria,
tiny.
Nigeria is 200
200
million
million people.
but that's not the exciting bit. What's going to give you a hard on is in the next 2 decades, it's going to be 400 people, 400 million people. And it'll be one of the top 10 countries in the world because where we're moving to, people, populations, demography is going to matter more, right? So if you look at Zimbabwe, if we continuously inward looking, and that's why we have an auction. An auction is just purely telling you that we're going to ration currency for the...
We're driven by imports. Why?
imports.
Why is the mentality not an export mentality? The population of London is what, 7 million?
Yeah, about 10, yeah.
So this entire country is not much bigger than London. How do you
bigger.
build it? How do you build an entire business with a focus on one city? But that's very disparate. So we've got the population of London, more or less, in a space much bigger than Britain.
With less buying power,
How many people does Tanzania have? Do you know?
about 40 something, closer to 50.
South Africa?
60 million.
60 million. DRC,
80.
80. Angola. I mean, think about it.
Why are you building a
why
business
would we-
focused on 15 million poor people?
Yeah. I'll concede the point.
Bewildering. It's bewildering. And I think that that's part of our problem. We're so inward looking. And the guy who created that structure was Ian Smith. He must be smiling in his grave.
No, I think so. I think he'll be frowning for the next
I think
1,000
he-
years.
See what you did there. No, but I think he'll be turning because I think what he'll be saying to himself is, "These guys missed the point. We did what we did.
They never learn.
He did what he did in a particular context. right?
Well, it was wrong.
No, but why?
No,
but-
there was a context. There was a
He
context.
set
There was
himself up.
no context whatsoever.
No, there
it
wasn't.
was
No,
terrible.
okay,
It was a terrible idea.
It was a terrible
and
idea,
He should
but-
never have.
The real terrible idea was UDI. But now, given
Yeah,
UDI,
so he
and they
the
had
idea
an
was
import,
it was his idea.
Yeah, but they had an import-driven economy, and then they were sanctioned. So they had to.
Why
substitute-
were they sanctioned?
No, but never mind. You get the point. So they had to substitute the imports and become independent. But as you say, it's been 56 years. After that, that had to be a phase that you grew out of. And eventually you had to look out. I mean, let's look at some of the countries that have done
I mean,
this
even
really well.
babies,
They grow.
they grow at some point.
Let's look at
You
who's,
can't be a fixed
who's,
I'm
who's,
66.
who's done this really well. And I'll give you 30 seconds to lecture. Who's done this really well is Germany. They started in the same position where they had nothing, and Japan. After the World War, the Second World War, they had nothing. They had to first of all create industry so they could eat.
Okay,
But what
so-
happened after that?
So, in my time away, one thing I actually learned, and to your point, which I thought was very illuminating, was unfortunately in the global world, if you're a small country, you cannot have a diversified economy, right? The bigger countries have got far more better economies than you do. And if you're a smaller country like Germany, Germany is actually a smaller country because 80 million people.
That speak a
and-
funny language.
that no one else understands. But the only thing that they could do was to be very good at a very specific thing and then export it to the global world. So rather than having Mercedes for 80 million people, have Mercedes for
The planet.
the planet.
But more
Right.
importantly than Mercedes are the SMEs that supply the automotive sector of the world.
Exactly. Well, they feed into the Mercedes supply chain. That's what people don't
And anybody
understand.
else's supply chain.
Exactly. So your seatbelt is made by one company. Doesn't matter which car you drive. And a lot of the components are like that. And that's the thing. In Zimbabwe, you have industries that want to be so diversified, who want to do everything. That's actually not what you need to do. What's happening in the global world is you need to be very specific. You need to pick one thing
Be the best at it.
and be the best at it. Because if you do that, then you have the planet as your market and not just 15 million people.
And this is the story of Germany, Japan, Portugal, South Korea, a lot of these countries that have relatively small populations, but bigger than ours. How they've actually grown, it's been an export-driven growth. We can't emulate the Chinese model because we don't have 1.6 billion consumers.
We don't. Because their competitive advantage is labor, right? So they're saying, hey, we can produce this at a far cheaper price than you will ever do.
And we can sell it to ourselves. There's 1.6 billion of us.
And,
Yeah.
and they have an amazing work ethic. 996, that,
Well,
this is-
because they're
they work from
1.4.
9 in the morning to 9 p.m., 6 days a week. Try getting
Absolutely.
people to go
I'm
to
not doing-
the...
Who's going to look after this?
No, absolutely.
getting Zimbabwe
Absolutely. And I think these are the issues we need to deal with. Look at Switzerland, right? Much smaller population than us. But look at its reach in
Well, not
terms
much
of
more, about the same.
about the same.
But
Yeah.
a tiny little country. Oh, what happened there? Guess like Zesa let us down, eh?
The usual. Power
Well,
cut.
yeah, we had a bit of a power cut, and the men of Tain kept us entertained while we were waiting for Zesa. So you may find that the levels are slightly different since you last spoke to us. But Rufaro, would you like to pick up where you were?
Well, no. Firstly, I just want to say that it's our power cut is it exemplifies the mess that we have with energy policy, and we should really just move on to a free market solution for power and just remove these silly monopolies that we have. Don't you agree, Tinashe?
No, I totally agree. I mean, we have problems at Zupco. We have problem with our electricity. We have problems everywhere, primarily because of these monopolies. So I'm for getting rid of these monopolies and let people decide what to buy and what to...
But isn't the real issue, going back to where we were before the break, we're inward looking.
Yeah, absolutely.
Should we just start being outward looking? Let's become an export driven economy.
George, you said something that was very interesting, and I think that the viewers will benefit from this. So it just occurred to George that you have people lining up at the auction for money when actually what they need to be doing is earning more. Because if you were in the SADC region or in Africa, you wouldn't care about the auction.
An
Right?
interesting
And you
point.
have tons of people who are queuing up for Forex, which we shouldn't.
An interesting point when you look at that list that was published a few weeks ago about
A week ago.
the people who got currency on auction. Delta and BAT are not on that list. Well, they're not as high as you might imagine.
Because they generate their own forex.
Precisely. And that's what we should be
Because there's
encouraging.
people that drink and smoke in the region that choose to drink and smoke Delta and BAT brands.
Absolutely, absolutely. And that's what we need to do. This idea that we should be continuously inward looking, going back to ideology, I think it's Ian Smith. Ian Smith ideas
The guy is
still live
Come on,
through.
let him rest.
But his ideas still run this economy. I mean, to me, it's so baffling. How can you have Ian Smith's ideas still running this economy where everybody is inward looking? We need to be upward looking. But I must say, there's only one thing that is global from
What's that?
Zimbabwe. Diaspora. It's the only product that we have that is purely and correctly globalized,
I'm very
where
passionate.
people have actually gone out there.
I'm passionate about this.
Yeah.
We've exported our kids, and our kids have done phenomenally well for us. They make a lot more money for us than the platinum, than the gold.
It's the only global product that we actually have. What do you think, Roar?
Look, I agree. I mean, it's a fact. But I think, so not only are we inward looking, I think that within Zimbabwe we're tribal, and I think within Africa we're tribal. So when I say within Africa we're tribal, when you think about us as a continent, right, we contribute less than 3% to global GDP. And yet there are 54 sovereign states, right, with presidents and prime ministers and all...
The whole shebang.
The whole shebang, right? And we're poor, by the way, right? We've got all the world's important minerals in abundance, and yet we're poor. But we believe that it makes sense that there are 54 sovereign states for less than 3% of global GDP. The whole of China, 1.4 billion humans, right? They are the world's second largest economy, is run by a standing committee with 7 people. But Africa, less than 3% of global GDP, has 54 governments.
With maybe
So-
20
I mean,
ministers each. So
Yeah.
we have 1,000 people running.
It boggles the mind. It's just...
Each with a military
it is,
presence.
It is stupid squared.
And CIOs.
Did you say stupid squid?
Yes, I did.
We have to agree. I think this idea of us continuously inward looking won't get us anywhere.
So we've got to look out.
We have to. In fact, that's what the Chinese did, right? Mao was inward looking and Deng was outward looking. He's the first guy to actually say, you know what we need to do is to look at the world. What can we offer the world that the world needs from us? And it's really a mental change that we need. Unless we change our mental ideas, I don't see us getting far. You have people queuing up for donated currency in Zimbabwe so that they can serve 2-3 million purchasing power.
So
in
sorry, explain that. What do
Zimbabwe.
you mean by people queuing up for donated currency?
No, I mean, people are going on the auction, right? These are industry giants that are going on the auction so that they can get currency.
Well, I think giants
at-
is, you're being generous. You're describing midgets as giants.
By our standards.
by our standards.
Yeah.
By our standards. And I think that's part of,
And
I
they think
think
they-
he's got a good point.
They think they make interesting products. They think they make fantastic products.
And it's good for the country because it's a
But-
product that's produced in
But
Zimbabwe.
they're not selling
this is the
to
21st
people
century.
that are willing to pay them enough money to buy the raw materials.
Exactly. Exactly.
That's maybe a good point for us to pause again. Let's keep it brief this time.
Yeah, and
Go
I
to
need
the
to
toilet,
change.
body,
I
you know.
need to change my drink
Mazoe.
of choice.
We'll see you in a couple of minutes. And we're back. Is that... Did you change your drink?
Well, I decided let's just go back to the original. And this is the original Malawi Shandy. It's a good summer drink, and that's what I'm gonna
Summer
have.
drink. And that's why you're wearing a jersey.
It's not a jersey, it's a cardigan.
Okay. And really?
Yeah, it's called a cardigan.
So Scoopy.
No, and this could be so because it's very cool.
Okay.
Anyway,
How is that drink looking so interesting and yet it has no alcohol?
Because it's a summer drink. It's supposed to be interesting, and I think it's got all the colors and all the different flavors.
I think we should get Tich and Tafazo back because Israel cheated.
Yeah. No.
What, you want it to be an AA meeting with alcohol?
No, we're actually not.
That actually
trying
sounds like a brilliant idea.
And we're not actually trying to give up alcohol. And be under no illusion. But before we broke away, we're talking about our.
Let me just have a sip.
Okay.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay. We're talking about our inward focus as a nation and as an economy. And perhaps it might not be the right way, but there were several references to China. Is China the right model? Were they export driven or are they domestic consumption driven?
Okay, so just a little bit of history or to context.
You see, this is why we sent you away for a
context.
couple of weeks.
Okay, so context. In economic development, there are 3 stages. The first stage is resource-based. So it's minerals, agriculture, and it's just exploitation of your resources. Primary sectors. Then the second stage is where the usual term is manufacturing, but that's not really where the competitive advantage is. The competitive advantage is in productivity and efficiency. You're more productive and you're more efficient than everyone else in the world. And that's where you had China, you had Japan before that, before 1990, in that phase where they're just producing better than everybody else and more efficient than everyone else. And with that, you have your economic growth. But then the third stage is innovation. And countries have found it very difficult to transition from being very productive, because you can only be productive to a certain extent, and move into an innovative stage. And I think China is having its problems, yeah.
This is what,
right.
So the production is your secondary stage. I'm just referencing my environmental science textbook. And innovative is tertiary.
Tertiary, but then tertiary doesn't really capture because Zimbabwe is also a consumer service related industry, but there's not much innovation that's happening.
Much really?
Very little. So I put it in words that we can all understand, that the final stage is really the innovative stage, where you have to come up with the new ideas, not replicating ideas that have been elsewhere and then just making it better. So Japan didn't invent anything, or were not innovative. They just made the car better, right? They made electronics in a better way, in a cheaper way, and then shipped it to the rest of the world. But for them to transition to Germany or the UK or the US, where you now, the term it, and I think Rufaro will know this, 0 to 1 problems. This is Peter Thiel.
You have to explain it to him. He's the 6-year-old on this.
Go ahead.
So there's 2 ways of looking at value creation. And Peter Thiel actually was very eloquently invented this way of thinking about it. So there's 0 to 1 and there's N+1. So N+1 is you have your tuck shop somewhere and it's doing well, you generate a bit of capital, and then...
I sell one of these a day.
Yep. And then you set up another one somewhere else. And then after 20, 30 years of hard work, you own 50 of these things and you're reasonably wealthy, right? Because you've been growing. So you had a business and you've just been adding +1. So hence the expression N+1. And then, so disruptive innovation has this idea of 0 to 1, where something didn't exist before, right? Like Facebook before 2004, right? Nobody knew that there could be such a platform. And then Mark Zuckerberg invents it, and he creates a whole new business that wasn't there before. And because he did that, he's built a business that's worth 800 billion, and he's worth almost 100 billion himself, right? That's 0 to 1. And I think that where we are in the world today, most of the value that's created is 0 to 1. It's not n+1. And I think that that's one of the challenges we have in this part of the world. We are obsessed with agriculture and resources, and we think that we're going to get wealthy by developing these industries. Look, we'll become less poor, sure, if we actually
do it properly.
Stop messing it up at the epic scale that we're messing it up right now. But we're not going to transition from third world to first world because we are doing well in agriculture or in exploiting natural resources. We actually have to transition to the model that he's speaking to, which is innovation. And sadly,
well, I think the second stage, which is productive. So you could have your farm, but you're just more productive than
But that's
the rest of the world. Sorry?
That's n+1.
Yeah, that's what we need to do because we're still way behind. And that's where China has been in the last 20 years, right? China has been in the last 20 years where they've just built better mousetraps, right? That's all you need to do. But then beyond that, because there's a limit to how better
a mousetrap
can be. And then beyond that, because you still have, I think, maybe 600 to 700 people who are still poor.
Well,
and to lift those...
But to the example, you see that certain mice that haven't been caught.
Precisely. Dang.
Yes. I'm so what I read.
So if you look at Africa, so it's not necessarily a Zimbabwean problem, but it's also an African problem in that we're not getting the basics right. China actually got the basic right. And one thing that Deng did was actually to look at Japan and ask the Japanese why they were successful. Look at Singapore and why they were successful, why South Korea was successful. And he understood that they had to open up the market. And the one thing that China could offer the world that the world needed was cheaper labor, right? And that's what they did, and they did very well. But what's starting to happen is they've got all the gains they can
From cheaper labor.
So now they need to move on to the next.
To ideas.
And I think that transition, most countries fail. Japan failed at that transition.
So what you're saying is we're still stuck. Let's take Dairyboard. They've done phenomenally. We talked about them a couple of weeks ago. We're stuck trying to sell more milk the same way that everybody else sells milk. Maybe we need to reduce our cost of producing milk.
That's what we need to do.
Find better ways of making milk. But while we're doing that, we need to think
better than the rest of the world, because that's what we need to do.
Maybe think about something that is not milk.
Well, at this point in time, we don't need to. There are many ideas in the world. So the idea of 1+, there are many ideas in the world. We don't have to be innovative. China was not innovative. You don't have to be. All you need to do is to just replicate the ideas from the first world, but do them in a cheaper and better way.
Fine. But is China working?
Look, I'm not sure I agree with that. I think
is China working?
The world has changed.
I think in the last 20 years it has worked.
I think China's coming apart at the seams right now because they at the end of they've been plucking low-hanging fruit for the last 30, 40 years. And I think the low-hanging fruit is done. And the path ahead of them requires more cognitive effort. And I think they're struggling.
I tend to agree with that. And I think the bigger problem...
So why are you advocating that we go down this road?
No, it's a natural transition that you go through. There's no way we're going to be more innovative than the Germans. Absolutely no way. I mean, if you just look at our universities and what's coming out of our universities, there's no way.
What's wrong with our universities?
Hey, nothing wrong. If you want to be politically correct, but I think that
we don't do politically correct.
Yeah.
So tell us.
What we're producing from our universities are redundant skills. That's the truth. Our polytechnics would do a far better job, but unfortunately, we're not producing the skills that we're not producing as many graduates as we need. And then what we're doing is sending all our kids to universities and picking up skills that are redundant in this world. I don't think that there is many people out there who need to learn how to speak English or how to write English well. I think that you now have, I mean, you have this translation and apps and all sorts. So somebody who's in China can easily learn English. They don't necessarily need an instructor. And those are the skills that we're producing.
I think that's a bad example. But I think perhaps if I may paraphrase, a better example is, the question is, if you go into a motor engineering faculty in any university in this country, how many of them are studying a computerized car?
We cannot afford.
And how many of those that have a computerized car in their lab, how many of them have an example of a computer board that was manufactured in the last 12 months?
2 months. I was about to say 2 months. You're quite right.
Well, they're probably looking at something that is 12, 15 years old.
You're quite right. All we need to do, the world is looking for cheap labor. Don't forget this, that the minimum wage, Joe Biden has just raised the minimum wage in the US. What do you think?
How much is it now?
I think he raised it to $15 an hour.
Maybe I should go be a minimum wage worker in the States.
Well, that's why we're very good at exporting people.
$15 an hour?
Yeah.
So if we can get people to work
Denmark
here,
is $22 an hour.
You see,
so if we can get people here to produce stuff at $1 an hour, which will be $8 a day,
that's all we need to do.
$160 a
overthink
month.
this. We don't need to overthink this. We just need to have low taxes and cheaper labor, and we'll get that work. That's all we need to do. The rest of Africa, that's all we need.
This is why you have call centers in India, not in New
There you
York.
go.
But we also tend to have the resources that cheap labor needs to convert.
Yes.
But
We
we're
have
not
all the
exploiting them
ingredients.
because we've told all the people who have got the capital, the technology, the human resources, and the wherewithal to actually do it, that, oh, yeah, if you invest in this part of the world in a mining project with a 20, 30-year lifespan, we are going to take you to the cleaners. So good luck with that. You know. So the policy framework is the incentive is not for people to bring capital, technology, and resources to actually exploit our rich mineral endowment. The incentive is for people to say, no, you know what, you guys carry on.
Because after we are all long dead, Zimbabwe will still be here, the resources will be here, and somebody will then decide to exploit them.
Okay. Having said all of this really interesting, depressing stuff.
It's not that depressing.
It's not depressing.
I don't know why you find it depressing.
No,
I think
it's not.
I think that
That's where
what's
the
exciting
opportunity
about
is.
Zimbabwe is that we have tremendous potential. We just haven't created the incentives to benefit from it, and you don't have to be Einstein to figure out what the incentives should be. So, you know, with any luck, over time, we're going to try things that don't work long enough.
That's why people, you know, that's actually a good point. That's why people just wait. They're like, oh, is that what Zimbabwe is doing now?
But are we doing the right stuff that they're waiting for?
No, that's why
People have been waiting for the
advocating.
Congo for 70 years. Now they're waiting for us.
No, the history of the world.
You're talking about this thing going from n+1 to 0 to 1. And yet, this week, parliamentarians were reporting that there's schools where one teacher has shown up. How do we do this? How do we do the transition from 0 to 1 if schools are not running?
Because everybody's queuing for option money.
Yeah, but look, I think that necessity is the mother of invention. And I think when you have a crisis, eventually that's where solutions come from, right?
So we must let the schools go to mud.
We are running experiments that are, to put it politely, not clever with education right now. And, you know, parents care about the education of their children, and they'll figure it out. They'll figure out a solution
Figure it out?
that doesn't involve
I
state
think I beg to differ
education.
there slightly. I think that this is a nationwide problem. We need to solve the nationwide problem. He's quite right that eventually people will make their own they'll find their way out of this quagmire. But I think that what's actually required is a nationwide understanding that socialism has failed everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
This is not 1920. This is not 1917, where you had the Bolshevik Revolution,
mm-hmm.
right? Like that idea, we need to kill it. This is not 1965, where Ian Smith is telling us to be inward looking.
Mm-hmm.
What we just need to do is be outward looking. Start looking at SADC. We don't even need to look at Africa and the world.
SADC's got the population of
SADC
America.
has got the population, and we just need to gear ourselves for SADC. If we do that, we'll generate enough currency that nobody has to queue for currency. I mean, people have been queuing
what
for
must we
currency.
do in the meantime?
We need
There's
to
a school where
abolish
there's
the
one
auction.
teacher in the entire school.
No,
This has got nothing to do with the auction.
But I think, look, by analogy, if you think about what happened with telecoms in this country, right? For the longest time, the penetration was 30%, and it was a nightmare getting a fixed line. And eventually, an entrepreneur in the private sector solved that problem and started Econet, and now we have more than 100% telecoms penetration. If you think that the solution to our educational problems reside in the current custodian who's presided over this mess over the last 20 years, I've got a bridge to sell you.
We've got to cut you off there because we're running out of time. Look, we never know what's the right way, what is the wrong way. Our intention is always to inspire thought, get people thinking about ideas, people talking about ideas, and hopefully in that we make a better nation. We come up with solutions that build this beautiful country that we call Zimbabwe. And we must always remember, in the words of Shakespeare, there is nothing good or bad. Only thinking makes it so.
I'm pretty sure Shakespeare stole that from one of the great Stoic philosophers. I just can't remember which one it was.
The principle holds.
But on that thought, I will say that I think that drinking whiskey is good.
It is. So, have a great weekend. Let's keep these discussions alive. Talk with you and yours. Talk with us on our social media platforms. There are a few books to give away at the end of the season.
YouTube.
Yeah. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. We really like hearing from you. Stay safe. COVID is real. Be good. If you can't be good, be good at it.
Cheers to that.
Cheers.